Here we go again with the fantasies of anti-Trump Republicans. The Washington Post reported over the weekend, quote, anti-Trump Republicans courted Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban to run for president in a third-party bid. Cuban, who rejected the advances, nonetheless expressed confidence in his ability to take on the presumptive GOP presidential nominee in an election. Quote, he could come after me all he wanted, and he knows I would put him in his place. All that said, again, I don't see it happening. There isn't enough time. They continue here. ABC's Shark Tank host declined to name the Republicans who approached him with the offer, but he said they told him that his bluster and volume combined with substance and the ability to connect with voters on a more personal basis would make him a viable candidate. Okay, this story is adorable. Think about what they're doing here. It hit me as I was going through the article yesterday. I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. They're trying to defeat Trump by finding a better Trump that they feel is more controllable and less of a lunatic. So I have zero doubt that the Republican establishment and the elites and the top operatives in the party sat down around a conference table. And they're like, okay, how do we defeat Trump? How do we defeat Trump? Any ideas, anybody? Anybody? And somebody said, why don't we make a list of the things that Trump is and try to find somebody who's just like that, who we can control more, who could beat him in an election? And they were like, that's it. So what is Mark Cuban? Mark Cuban is a loud, obnoxious, I would say he's kind of a buffoon, even though somebody disagrees with me, billionaire. That's exactly what Trump is. A loud, obnoxious, kind of a buffoon billionaire. So this shows how disconnected they are, man. They don't get it. It's not that people like Trump because he's a buffoon and a billionaire. They like him. I mean, we've gone over the million reasons why he ended up beating all those other idiots in the GOP primary parade. But they like him primarily because he portrays himself as anti-establishment, and he portrays himself as, above the fray and with the common man and with the working class voter. Now, whether or not that's true is a totally separate conversation, and you guys know where I stand on that. I think he's a liar and a fraud and a con man, and I don't think he's going to represent you in any way. But that's more or less his appeal. It stems from a few things. Yes, the aggressive part helps. Yes, the over-the-top confidence helps. But probably the biggest thing is that he portrays himself as, I'm with the little guy, and he says stuff like, I'm not going to cut Social Security, I'm not going to cut Medicare, hey, maybe we should do less war, hey, perhaps we should do tariffs so that we can force corporations to stay in the U.S. instead of doing stupid free trade deals and sending them overseas. By the way, again, he personally benefits from those trade deals, so he's a liar when he says he wants to keep the jobs here. But it's these things, when he says them, people like it. They go, oh, he's on my team. You think Mark Cuban would do that kind of rhetoric? Fuck no. Mark Cuban, not in a million years would he get out there and say those kinds of things that are kind of genuinely populist. But in the minds of these idiot Republican establishment freaks, they're like, well, that stuff doesn't matter. Like, that didn't enter into their calculation. Like, oh, maybe it's the anti-establishment angle, and maybe it's the populist angle. Nobody brought that up. Instead, they were like, I guess they like him because he's a billionaire. I guess maybe that's why they like him. So Mark Cuban's a billionaire too. Maybe he can win in an election. If they're just going for billionaires, why don't you fucking run Mr. Sheldon Adelson himself, who's 1,003 years old? Because it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's allegedly a billionaire. They like him for other reasons which go right over your fucking heads. So, I mean, there is no end to how disconnected the Republican establishment is. Like, everything they try to analyze and break down, they're just wrong. And honestly, nobody should be surprised by this, because we know that top people in the Republican establishment all along were laughing and mocking Trump and saying there's no way he's going to get far at all, even after he had proven himself to be serious. So, after he took New Hampshire, people were saying, hey, after the first debate, he's going to be gone. And then he won the first debate. Then okay, after maybe the second debate, and then he won that. And then they just kept moving the goalposts. After the third debate, fourth debate, after Iowa, after New Hampshire, after Nevada, and then he started winning all these different states. And idiots still were out there saying, peak Trump. This is peak Trump. He can't go any further than this. I mean, let's be serious. Remember Bill Kristol, the neocon douchebag? He's like, oh no, peak Trump, definitely. He made like 8 peak Trump predictions. And this was back when it was like halfway through the race. We covered a story on it. I was laughing my ass off. All the other guys, Karl Rove, all of them feel the same way. And now what's their solution? What's their answer? Well, find somebody who has all the negative characteristics that Trump has, none of the positive characteristics, and somehow they'll beat him? No, it's a fucking fantasy. The many Republican politicians over the past few decades, they made their fucking bed. Now they got to sleep in it. And as we've described before, on some issues, Trump is just the quintessential Republican. On the racism and the xenophobia and the bigotry, he just says it in plain language when others are speaking in coded language. So he's the quintessential Republican on that issue. You made your bed, you got to sleep in it. And then on some other issues, he's actually better than you guys. He realized, oh, Republican-based voters don't care about these, traditional free market values, laissez-faire, unfettered capitalism. They don't know anything about that. They're just like, is he looking out for me? Is he not looking out for me? And when Trump says, hey, I'm actually going to fight for unions and I'm going to make sure that you keep the jobs in the U.S., they go, all right, he's looking out for me. So again, in some ways, he's the quintessential Republican. In other ways, he's better than them. And they're clueless. It's amazing. They must have the least accurate analysts in human history in the room with them when they're trying to figure out how to take down Trump. I honestly want to know what's next. Like, who are you going to go to next? Because first they thought, Mitt Romney, he's super popular. He'll take down Trump. And then they did polls and Mitt Romney got like negative 46%. And they're like, oh, that was a bad idea? Okay, I'm going to find somebody else. Oh, there we go. Mark Cuban. He'd definitely beat him. No, he wouldn't. I'm seriously curious who they're going to pick next. Ken Ham? Maybe try that. Pee Wee Herman? Who the fuck knows?